Hey, this interview was conducted about a year or so ago. And since then, the Patterns of Possibility podcast has disappeared and reemerged with a new, more focused mission of being yourself, living your truth, and making lasting friendships. Emotional intelligence is important to understanding yourself so that you can create the lasting friendships that you want. And the sooner that you learn about emotional intelligence, the better off you're going to know yourself, you're going to be able to live your truth, and you will make those lasting friendships. In this episode, JT talks about how he empowers kids to do just that. Hey, what's going on? My name's Coach Lee Hopkins. My pronouns are he, him, his, and you're listening to the Patterns of Possibility podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to helping you replace harmful patterns with new possibilities. In each episode, we'll explore topics that inspire you to be yourself, live your truth, and make lasting friendships. In this episode, I have an interview for you. I'm back with interviews and very excited about this one. I know I say that for everyone, but people excite me. So I'm excited for this one too. My guest today is JT, and he is going to, of course, introduce himself because I let people tell their own stories. That's what I say. So JT, can you tell us who you are, what you do, why you're here?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm JT. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I am a director, creator, and executive producer of The Mr. K Show, which is a podcast for kids. And it's available on all streaming services. So wherever you get Patterns of Possibility, The Mr. K Show is there as well.
Yeah, awesome. So, Mr. K Show, I wonder, um, how did this come about? This is really interesting. Can you tell us more about what the show is?
Yeah, absolutely. So to start off with your first part of the question, how did it come to be? I actually started at the beginning of the pandemic last year. I would never forget it. Friday the 13th in March. I was a teacher in Philadelphia, and our entire world got flipped upside down, just like a lot of other people at that time. And for the couple of weeks after, I was feeling so many emotions, and I really just wanted to just talk to people about what is happening and to highlight and showcase people. So I was doing exactly what you're doing, just having interviews, talking with people, and talking to adults and talking to teachers, talking to actors, talking to music therapists, and just showcasing the amazing work that they're doing in the educational space with children, with entertainment, puppeteering. And at the end of the summer, I had 10 episodes, and I was like, all right, let me do this again. It was a lot of fun. So I did another season, another 10 episodes. And at the end of last year, I was feeling that I was missing something. I was missing that passion, that drive. And I loved talking to all of the people that were on my podcast for the adults. But there was just that something that was missing with creating something that's for kids. I've been an early childhood educator for more than a decade in a variety of different roles. And I always had this knack for theater. I grew up in the theater. My parents were in theater. We always did Christmas musical dramas and Easter musical dramas. I loved playing. There were puppet shows that were, during the summer. And I just wanted to create something that was fun and engaging for children. When I was a preschool teacher, I wanted to mimic my day as a preschool show that we grew up, and starting with a good morning song and ending the day with a goodbye song. And then throughout my time as a preschool teacher, I noticed that children need to be taught how to do things, and that's how the song Teamwork came up. Like teamwork, work together. And the kids would sing that song, and then I just went on GarageBand, plucked a couple of things, and just played it in the classroom. And it was so cool seeing kids picking up buckets from centers and singing the song and working together. And so a lot of those songs just came from my time as a preschool teacher, many, many years ago. And so I had all these songs just in my back pocket, and I said, let's create something. And that's how the Mr. K Show became a children's podcast, from a adult podcast.
Okay, okay. So you gave us a whole lot there, and I really love it. I mean, I'm so glad that you're willing to share so much with us. So then, you said that you started just with your own feelings about the pandemic and wanting to share with other people and understand what other people are going through, and you just
Hmm.
turned that into essentially something for younger people, like a early childhood education. Like, so that's like what 5, 6, 7, 8, kind of like that age.
Yeah, so not really an age range on the show. I like to have all kids welcome, because the second you start putting an age range on something, once a child hits that age, they're going to say, "Oh, that's a baby show," or "that I'm too
Ah,
old for that." And so I
hmm,
just have all kids, from 2 years old all the way up to 10-year-olds who are loving the show and are very immersed. And I even have
yeah.
adults listening as well and enjoying it. So
I
it's
mean,
for everyone.
absolutely. I mean, who doesn't like music? I still remember when you talked about preschool, I thought about my preschool teacher and the impact that they had on me. I still remember it to this day. I remember one thing is where they helped me pour syrup on my pancakes.
Mm,
And I was just like, wow. And she actually like kind of poured it up from a little height so it looked all magical when it fell. And those kind of things, just stay with you. So when you give a child that experience at such a young age, and with the music, you get that ingrained into them. They feel like excited to pick this up. Like you're saying, you've seen the kids just take your song and make it their own. It's fantastic.
absolutely.
Yeah. So then, you know, uh, I wonder what was one of the challenges about. I'm curious about the challenge that you may have had with, like, I don't know. You said that it came pretty. I'm thinking it came pretty easily to create these songs, to come up with stuff. I mean, do you have a backlog of items or things, songs that you've had, but um, things are constantly changing in our world, and so adapting those to younger people, like they're using technology, whereas 10 years ago they weren't really
Hmm.
as much. So I wonder, how do you adapt to some of the more recent challenges for kids? Because this is all about helping them understand kind of how to navigate through life, right?
Absolutely. And the lessons and the values that we're showcasing are universal, and they're from
Hmm.
generations to generations. And so a child could listen to this 10 years from now and it will still be applicable into what's happening. But one major movement that really changed my perspective was the Black Lives Matter movement, and in making sure that all children are seen, especially people of color. And so our podcast, as the director, I created a diversity content committee where I have other people from different backgrounds, people of color, and we're able to create and make sure that all of our shows are making the possibilities for everyone, and not thinking about, okay, well, that won't, a child might not know what that is, or let's add this a story. And it just really has had these conversations. They're tough conversations that you need to have. And so that is one specific area that we're definitely going to be continuing into season two. Just making sure that all people from all backgrounds are seen and heard. I guess heard because it is a podcast.
Yeah,
So,
but we
but
definitely get it.
one part that we do allow is, at the end of each episode, we have a show and share where the king of sharing comes out, he sings his song, and then a real life child comes on and they get to tell the king of sharing anything that's happening. And, children at a very young age, the smallest minute things are really big in their lives. So one kid said, I like to do flips on a bouncy house. And I said, or the king of sharing said, cool, who did you like to do it with? Or they did a baking challenge, or, I have a dog, I have a cat, like the smallest things, but it's just allowing for children to have a platform, to be seen, to be heard, and to make our world even better by hearing
Yeah.
and listening from them.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, you're early childhood education, so this is really telling them or really showing them, telling, showing, not going to nuance it here. So
Yeah.
they're really understanding and learning that what they say is important. And that is the lesson that I think you're getting from that. They're learning that what they have to say is important, no matter how silly it might seem to us as adults, but it's something important and worthwhile. You've got our attention. You've got a lot of people's attention. What do you want to say? That's fantastic. I think that's very empowering. And then you talked about diversity. That's really awesome too. I like that you're talking about diversity because it's a culture shock when you grow up and you believe the world is one way, and then you run into people that completely flip your world, and you're confused. You don't know what to do. You're combative. You don't know what to do with that, and so you're giving them the tools to not only deal with the ability, or not only not only understand what's out there, but also understand how to deal with it when they come across it. Right. So fantastic. I can't wait to hear some more about diversity. There's a whole lot of things to talk about um, with uh, with the awareness that we have as adults and things that are coming in, like ableism and even ageism, which is,
Hmm.
I don't know if they're kid appropriate, but maybe they are. What do you think?
Yeah, those are topics that, are people think, oh, children won't be able to be able to handle, or they won't be able to learn. But you have to do it in a way that they'll be able to understand, and do it on a, just make it empathy. One of our episodes is the golden rule: do unto others as you want to be treated, and making sure that you're treating all people with respect. That's such a great point you brought up, Lee, regarding ageism, because once people reach a certain age, it seems like, okay, we don't want your ideas anymore. Oh, you can't handle technology. Oh, we don't want you. And then it seems that people are being thrown out, and younger people are being brought in, and so that's why we. Our podcast has people hired who are, of all ages. Everyone is welcome, as long as you're able to produce and to create at a high quality level. Then everyone is welcome. But those are really great ideas, and good values that we can definitely explore more in our seasons to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no shortage of things to learn. We're constantly learning every day. So that's fantastic. So then I want to know a little more about you. So you talked about how you got into this, but why the passion of teaching kids? What drove that passion?
Yeah. So from a very, very young age, I remember, like, the age of 2 or the age of 3, I would always stand super close to the TVs. And back then they were like super tiny, and you had to stand close to actually like feel like you're immersed. And so I always just remember watching like Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street. I was a huge Barney and Friends freak. I wanted to be one of those kids. And that's another reason that I loved Barney Friends, because it was children of all cultures, all backgrounds, even on Sesame Street. And so, in the back of my mind, at the age of 2 or the age of 3, I clearly, distinctly remember thinking, if I broke this TV, I could jump into the TV and be a part of this show. I could be one of those kids. And that has been ingrained into the back of my brain for forever, basically. And my mom was a teacher, was a middle school teacher. My grandfather was a music teacher for 30 plus years. My aunt was a second grade or first grade teacher for forever. And so it's kind of in my family, and I always love education, and always having this connection with children, being able just to talk to them like they're human beings, not baby talking to them, just asking them how they are. And I think that from a very young age, I was babysitting, and being a part of like children's ministries, and making sure that they feel included. And it's just a really great thing that got me into the education space. At one time, I wanted to be an English teacher of high school, And I remember after a semester, my mom's like, "No, like you're really
Wow.
great with little kids, and that's kind of the path you went." So thanks, mom, for pushing me down that avenue because who knows, I would have been a terrible English teacher in high school. That's
Oh man.
not my niche. So
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. It doesn't sound like it at all. I mean, I when I picture English teachers, and if there's any out there, I'm sorry, but I picture it as more dry and more matter of fact. There's probably not much singing. So, uh, thanks, mom.
some
That's
rapping, right? Right, you can rap some
oh
poetry
yeah.
and stuff. That would be cool.
Oh man, that what was that the movie? Uh, Gangster's Paradise? Is that the no? That's the song. But there was a movie. Wasn't that a teacher that kind of came to the high school and
Hmm.
did all the things? I don't know if she rapped or not. I've never seen the movie, so I don't know. But that would have been you. It sounds ridiculous even saying
Yeah.
it.
It's just crazy how like the patterns of possibility, the patterns that are in your lives are pushing you towards where you're supposed to be. And a lot of the times I look at the patterns and I was just focusing on like the no's, focusing on the negativity, oh, I didn't get this opportunity. Oh, I didn't get this internship, getting really upset and, taking it personally. And then I had to train my brain to focus on the yeses, to focus on the good, you know, who is going to say yes, who is believing in you, who is going to be able to
Mhm.
push you and guide you. And
Yeah.
all these people have been moving me along, and I'm noticing all these patterns of these possibilities that are endless. And the world is your oyster. You just have to find that path and just stay dedicated.
Yeah, so it's just very natural for you to do the teaching and music because that runs in your family. It's a huge influence on you, and you work. I don't know. I guess when I'm curious though. So we talked about the patterns, and I'm always looking for one in someone. When I talk to them, I'm like, well, what led to this? To led to that, and so I'm curious. Like, you've had the ability to or access to teachers music, so you learned music. When did you start actually like kind of targeting specifically to young kids? Was it something that uh I'm looking for, I guess, like what happened after 2 years old?
What happened after 2 years old?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great question. I got immersed into theater, into musical theater. At the age of 4, my grandfather was teaching me piano. And so that kind of led me down the path of music. And, I, instead of watching like preschool television shows, I would be watching like The Sound of Music or Mary Poppins, like these really long musicals, but I just loved them. I remember for my fourth birthday, or I guess it was my fifth birthday, I was in preschool, and instead of bringing in like a Barney tape, I brought in The Sound of Music, and we watched The Sound of Music, and I was the only one watching it, but it was just something that I loved, and so I really always have wanted children to have a love of music and to have a love of theater. I remember going to my first Broadway musical was The Keenan Eye, and I think I was like 5 years old, and my parents tell me that we were like way up in the top, but I just remember like watching the entire thing and just being like speechless because it was my first experience of being able to immerse myself into that culture. And so
Hmm.
that is part of why I am so interested in children and into teaching, but also creating things that are for children because I want to give them that same experience that I had. And they might not be able to go to a Broadway play, but I want to give them that same level of quality and do it in a
Hmm.
fun and interactive way where they are learning something at the same time.
Yeah, that's what I picked up too. I picked up the so specifically looking at the idea of talking to children as if they are regular human people instead of baby talking. And it sounds like that's what happened with you. Like you just got people just treated you like, oh, you're just a person, but you're smaller. And that's it. And everything you say is valid. Hey, I'm going to share some music with you. Oh, you're interested in something more than Barney and Friends. Well, here's something, The Sound of Music, that's a little more grown up
Hmm.
that you can relate to as well. So it sounds like that experience worked out very well for you, and you want to replicate that for the others, for other kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I hear that it is more beneficial to talk to children just a way normal, like without baby talk and stuff too. It's better for development.
Yes, it is. Especially when they are growing in those early years. It's important that you are like just talking to them normally, because then they might have like a speech impediment, or they might catch up on, some of the words that they are saying. And I remember growing up and was very small for my age. I was always the shortest kid in class, like the scrawny little thing. And I go to a restaurant and I'm able to read, and they don't give me a kids menu. And I remember like putting my fist down and saying, I can read. And, I never wanted a child to feel inferior like that. I wanted to always bring out the positive in them. And so just talking to them and, giving them the benefit of the doubt, and knowing, reading the room. You have to read the room with kids. You have to play off of them, because some kids might be able to take things to the next level, like what you were saying, about like the Sound of Music, and some kids can't. And so you have to adapt how you are talking to a child based off of, where they are developmentally.
Yeah, so you have to personalize your conversation with them, like based on what they can understand. So do you find that a lot of children really understand more than what we give them credit for?
Yes. Yes. There
That
are
was
so
kind of
many
a
times when, I love television. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And seeing shows that are, taking kids' minds to the next level. But there are a lot of shows where it's just brainwashing them, and it's just so like quote unquote babyish, because that's what people think. Oh, well, this is what kids need, and it's like no, like kids are sophisticated. They might not pick up on every single little thing, but make it fun and enjoyable, but don't bring it down so that they're feeling like they're not going to be able to get anything out of it.
Yeah, I think that engagement is important. You don't want to brainwash them, essentially, put them in front of a TV and they're not interacting at all. I mean, if you have to watch a video, then maybe there should be interaction would be better. But passively absorbing information doesn't really help, especially when they have to go and apply this information too. I really like this idea of actually giving some real examples of situations. So in your latest episode, you talked about teamwork, and I thought that was a really great episode because it kind of highlighted different points of view from each of the characters. Can you talk a little bit about what inspired that episode?
I love that. Yes. So that is actually something that happened in a classroom when I was teaching. I just remember, kids coming up to me and giving me all their different perspectives, and I just remember I said, okay, we're going to each share what really happened. And I know the kids that were exaggerating, and weren't telling the truth. And then there were the kids that I could really count on that were like, no, Mr. K, this is actually what really happened. But again, the teamwork song came just from kids wanting to be independent. When you're 3 and 4 years old, you want to be independent. You want to do things on your own, even though it might take a long time to do it. And so I really had to show my preschoolers that no, we can all take one side of the bucket and walk it over and dump the Legos, and being able to do it on their with a team, and to use that teamwork. And this goes from, as young as 2 years old all the way up to even fourth graders, because fourth graders are starting to become even more independent. They feel like they know it all because they're about to go to middle school. And so that was kind of where I was coming from, because as a fourth grade teacher, I was noticing kids that wanted to be independent and not let anyone else do anything. And so I kind of merged all the experiences together to create that episode.
I like it. I like it. So I'm curious again about the way this went down. So I want to understand, is it that you got the kids together and you asked them all in front of each other, what was your experience? What was your experience? What was your experience?
Kind of. I always wanted to take children like possibly like into the hallway or back into like the library and just like kind of talk to them through individually, because then one kid might say, "Nah, that's not what happened." And when I was a newbie teacher, I would have them do it together, and I learned that's not the way to do it. Take them aside, have them draw a picture, while they're waiting to share their story. If they're old enough to write it down, and that way I can compare notes and have those receipts and really
Hmm.
understand what happened and have a generalized picture.
Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning of the episode that also adults listen to this, and I know that there are some adults that do not understand this concept, that other people experience the same thing
Hmm.
in a different way.
Yep.
God bless you for teaching these kids. I mean, bless your heart for teaching these kids. So yeah, because I think that's a fundamental thing to pick up. Like you have your life and you have your experiences, but also other people have their experiences and understanding them is important. So I'm curious about the receipts that you had and like, I mean, I'm so fascinated by the interaction with the kids and this. So you sat them all down and you said, "Hey, this is how this person thinks it went. So that person thinks it went." I know that you said that initially you got them all together, but after you learned, what was the most effective way to kind of share each other, make them aware that each
Hmm.
other had different experiences?
Yeah. So I would, like what you were saying, start out having them together when I was, starting out teaching, and it wasn't getting anywhere. It was just turning into fights. And so I learned that I just asked the question, "What happened? What happened?" And that is a question with so many different answers, and that way they're just able to explain what happened. And a lot of times, even as adults, we want to have the chance to be able to explain what happened. We don't want to be accused of something that we didn't do, or something that didn't happen
Right.
because the person was told one thing but it was not the truth. And so even as a leader, I've learned to ask those questions, what happened, those
Exactly.
kinds of things.
Yeah, definitely. Because even though you may have said something one way, it could have impacted another person a completely different way.
Hmm.
And feeling accused is definitely something we don't want to do to anyone. We want to get the truth, and that because that doesn't solve anything. That doesn't help resolve any problem. Pointing the finger. Now we know what the problem is. Let's go tackle the problem, not anything else.
Right. And
So
it's hard on a podcast because, one, kids have to use their imaginations and they're listening, and two, you have that time crunch. So I had to create it where each kid was just sharing, you know at a time, and there wasn't any arguments, but I really wanted to share, no, this is what could happen if if you share.
oh
So
yeah. Yeah, that could be one for the parents to understand. Hey, just don't make that mistake.
yeah.
So I really like that you create a safe place for these kids to share their stories or share their experience with you. So that starts off right away. Like as a teacher, they're like, you can talk to me about anything and here. So what happened? But and also you said that you know some of the behavior of the kids and you could kind of pinpoint who is making a little more exaggerated and people who are more reliable and
Mhm.
so forth. What made you so dedicated to emotional intelligence and teaching kids that?
Yeah, social emotional learning, or SEL as they say in the education field, is very, very important for children to learn how to handle their emotions. Growing up, we weren't taught how to handle our emotions. We were just taught, just, don't share your feelings, just suck it up. And it's just very important how children are developing anxiety, and they're developing depression at at record ages now. And it's just important that there are school counselors that are taking the time to teach children how to handle their emotions. Do it in a way that is, beneficial for not only for them but for the people around them as well. And so I feel that school counselors are awesome. They are such a backbone of a school because they're able to talk to children. They're able to have those connections. And they even are teaching the teachers, in the
Mhm.
classrooms, how to handle different behaviors and to handle those emotions. And it's always evolving. And that's why I feel like school counselors, there should be a lot more in schools, because there are more and more children that are, developing these feelings, these emotions at, as I said, at record
Mhm.
lower ages.
Definitely. So you talked about how, SEL, I've not heard that before, social emotional learning. I have heard that, but there's it's becoming a very conscious thing. Now people are really keying into that and showing how it is very important to success in life. You got to be able to control your emotions to get through difficult situations, be resilient,
Hmm.
those things. So have you seen what happens, or have you seen children who have low social emotional intelligence? Like, have you seen how that has affected them, or have you seen anything that would affect them?
Yeah, so working from literally from 2 year olds all the way up to 10 year olds, and almost every single grade level, there are children that have a low social emotional awareness. They don't know how to handle all of these emotions that are, happening on a daily or even an hourly basis. And so just using a toolbox that you can have in the back of your mind, going to professional developments that are, how to handle children that have anxiety. What are ways that you can help a child with depression? And that's where the safe space really comes into play, where you're not there just to teach a child. You're there to really just invest in them. And it's a lot easier for early childhood education because you are with those kids as a classroom teacher, all day, every day, except when they go to lunch or to specials. And so you do create those connections and you get that awareness for children. You also have to model it yourself personally. And so
Yes.
if I'm feeling upset, I'm not going to start lashing out and start screaming at the top of my lungs. I'm going to take a deep, calming breath because that's what I'm teaching the children. And so it's very important that you are being the model. I always use the analogy of when a child is screaming at a store or a restaurant, everyone around is not looking at the child, they're looking at the caretaker and how they react. And so it's very important that you, as the adult, have the autonomy just to take a step back, take a breath, and then start using different strategies for your child. Also, using positive behavior is essential. As I said before, you're focusing on the positive. Praising them for doing a positive act or a positive deed that they did. And also, if you have other children, praising them for doing a positive behavior, and that might change the mindset of a child and thinking, oh, now I need to mimic this behavior because that brings, you know, attention from a caretaker or from a teacher.
Ah, I see. I see. Yeah, definitely that the scenario of the child screaming in a restaurant or a store grabbed my attention because now I do think about it and I think about how the parent is treating them. And people of my age, I'm almost 40, people of my age and maybe older would say, "Oh, you need to whip that person, need to whip them because they're being so bad, and that caretaker has no idea how to raise kids. They're a disgrace and all that stuff." But we found that that's not really helpful, right?
Right. Because then you become fearful. You start becoming fearful of making the wrong move. You're always like walking on eggshells, and that's not how you should have with the child. You need to have a positive connection, a positive relationship. But you also don't want to be walked all over by a child. You have to have
Absolutely.
this distinct barrier. Like, no, you need to be firm with them, but you also need to be fair with them as well.
Oh, firm and fair. I like that.
Yes.
Yes. So that sounds like a mantra to live by with kids because they definitely need boundaries. They don't know as much about the world as we do. They depend on us to help them and guide them through it. So definitely we want to be fair and we want to be firm to help them be strong. Um, so then, with the emotional intelligence, you have done a lot of extensive work. It sounds like you've done extensive work because you believe in modeling in front of the kids. So, I mean, that must have taken quite a bit of time because I know that uh, just dealing with a few kids here and there can be difficult for many people, but you do this all the time for young ones. So how did you do that, or what did you do to get that experience?
So I went to a teacher preparation college at a small liberal arts college in Philadelphia. And I had great mentors, who helped with behavior management and really just taught the positive way of how to handle these emotions. And then once I stepped into the actual classroom, I was, using, a clip chart, trying to praise them. And then I found the awesome app Class Dojo, which each child gets an avatar or a monster, and then they get rewarded points for doing positive deeds. So being respectful, being a role model, you know, having good manners, and each child can have a different goal, and then at the end of each week or the end of 2 weeks they can cash in those tokens for prizes, just as a positive reward for them. And that was such a game changer, going into my first few years as a official certified teacher, because previously I was like a preschool teacher, a preschool assistant, um, and so as having like my official classroom. And then I went to Penn State for my master's in special education, and that's when I started to start thinking about how do I handle those behaviors that are extreme. And so I was able to write my thesis paper on using an individualized behavior plan for children that need a little bit more assistance. So if the Class Dojo point system isn't working, then you do this individualized sticker chart where each subject or each period of the day, so morning meeting, breakfast, reading time, song time, they get a smiley face. And then after a couple of smiley faces, they get to do 5 minutes of whatever they want. And
Hmm.
kids love that because it's taking ownership over their emotions and over their behavior, which is great.
Yeah. So many wonderful things about that. It definitely the autonomy, I'm learning something and I'm gaining something. I can clearly see the benefit of what I'm doing. Like if I behave this way, the positive reinforcement, I will get this I'll get these tokens and I'll get this free time that I want. And then wow, with this free time I have my own responsibility. And so
Hmm.
you teach them how to be responsible. So a couple of things I caught in there though about emotions, the positive emotions. So you talked about the way to deal with emotions in a positive way. So I'm thinking about somebody who is like full of anxiety, or maybe because anger is so easy to pinpoint, someone who's had a tantrum. So what do you do? What do you do? What would you do in that situation?
That's such a great question because different people handle it in different ways. It's all about the relationship with the child. So the day one, you have to make that connection. You have to make that positive relationship with that child, because then once they are having a tantrum, you're able to get down on their level. If they are shorter than you need to get down on their level, look at them directly in the eye and talk to them in a positive way. What happened? Going back to that question, what happened? Are you feeling? And sometimes they're so uncontrollable and they're not able to pinpoint how they're feeling. So I have like a feelings chart where it has all different feelings, and then they're able to point to which feeling they are, and then I'm able to talk them through that feeling. Now, if they're still unable to control, then that's when I might have like a dean of students who has a positive relationship, or a school counselor, and then they're able to come in and give more services and interventions, on the spot immediately to assist the child.
I gotcha.
But
Yeah. So then, yeah. So I hear you have lots of tools. You've gone to training for this, so you have lots of tools to actually interact with them and help them understand what's going on. I firmly believe that when we have these emotions, they come and they all of a sudden, if we don't know what they are, we're acting upon them. We've not seen this before. It's so intense. I don't know what to do. So that's what happens. And it happens to
mhm.
the kiddos too. And so it happens to everybody who is human. And so you have a chart to teach them what emotion they're dealing with. And I find that is so fantastic because it's something that I did as like a 35-year-old. I looked at a chart to kind of figure out to increase the emotional intelligence because um, the way to connect to people is to basically describe your experience. Because you can't live their experience, but you can describe it. So you're teaching the young ones to be able to describe what's happening to them, name it to tame it.
Yeah.
So
And it's also important that you are looking again for those patterns, and to track when are these behaviors happening. So what I would do is I would just have a checklist of different times, and maybe the child is eloping, they're refusing to do their math. And I'm noticing, okay, math time every single day, there's something. And I find out that the child doesn't like math, or maybe they're about to take a spelling test and they're starting to act out. Okay, it's because they don't want to take this test. So again, looking at those patterns, always being watchful and aware of your children. And I know it's easier when you're a parent because you only have a few kids, but when you're a teacher of 28, 30 second graders in a small classroom, you know, you really still need to be paying attention and aware of those behaviors. And also not just focusing on the children that are doing those negative or those undesirable behaviors, because many times you want your entire class to look like the poster child of teaching and saying yes sir, okay, and that's not how it is in teaching. And so um, knowing that it's okay if all your children are not all sitting crisscross applesauce on the rug. Maybe some are kicking their legs up in the air, or maybe they're twirling their hands. As long as they're on the carpet and they're interacting, I'm okay with that. Because at the beginning of my teaching career, I wanted them all to be perfect, all to look great. And that's not how it is. We all learn. You know, Even as adults, when we're talking, like right now, I have a pencil in my hand. It's just one of my quirks. I always have to have something in my hands and, drawing or things like that. And so I've taken that and allow kids, to draw when they might be bored, because it's giving them something to do instead of them running around a classroom and hitting other friends. So always focusing on the positive, but also intervening when you know that a trigger is happening for a child, and try to avoid those triggers and giving them as much notice as possible.
yeah, because I was gonna ask you about the intervention and how that comes about.
Mhm.
Um, so you've been tracking their behavior and you've noticed that some people are a little cranky at this time. So then what would you do to intervene? Because you know that math is coming up and you know that they're not going to like it. How are you going to handle that? How do you do that?
So I make them like a teacher's helper, and I allow them to pass out like the whiteboards, and have them be the teacher and have them call on kids to come up and to play on this smart board, and um, you know show how to do the problems. And then I learned that once you engage that child at that time, they're going to take more ownership over their behaviors and start loving math. And then teaming them up with maybe they're really, really low and they're struggling with math, teaming them up with a child that is on a higher level of math, and, making that connection. And then the students are able to teach each other instead of you being the one that teaches. And a lot of the times, Lee, I noticed that kids are willing to listen to other kids, not the teacher. So I could show them a bazillion times how to do something, or I might use like a puppet, and or a stuffed animal, and they might listen that way. But I've learned that if they usually like to learn from their peers, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I didn't know that about kids. I kind of thought that maybe it's because of the way I was grown up. Maybe it's the way I grew up, thinking that, oh, adults know stuff and our kids don't. But and now that I think about it, I think, well, middle school, high school, they talk about stuff between them. Peer groups, we like to learn from our peer groups. Our elders don't know as much as we think, or they think, so we roll our eyes at them. And the
Mm-hmm.
kids don't know as much as we do either, so we roll our eyes at them.
Right.
So yeah, it definitely makes sense.
Again, you have to read the room. Some kids
Hmm.
don't want to be with another child; they just want to be with the teacher. And so you have to play off of how the kid is feeling, and use what's best for their learning strategy.
So then, what are some of the things that you do to enforce the positive behavior, like reinforce the behavior? You said that you see them doing something good or good or bad. Let's remove that because I don't think that's in your vocabulary either, right? Good or
Right.
bad?
So the
Yeah.
the good you usually, but when they are having a temper tantrum, you do need to label that undesirable behavior. So we don't say bad
Yes.
behavior, we say undesirable, because I'm looking for the desirable. And so
Hmm.
what you do is you have to just say, wow, like just the littlest, smallest thing, like, wow, Nino, I noticed that you're sitting crisscross applesauce on the carpet. Way to be a role model to our class. And just that positive way is just like, oh, he's noticing me, oh, I'm going to do this more often because it's going to get me attention. This might be the only time a child in their day has a positive interaction with an adult. Some kids might not have an adult in their home because they're working 2-3 jobs, and it's an older sibling that's taking care of them. And so just, again, modeling a positive relationship with that child, and just talking to them. Don't always have to talk about rules and procedures, but hey, how was your weekend? What did you do?
Hmm.
Share. How's your baby sister? Oh, she's crying again. Oh, you must be so tired. I understand. How
Hmm.
about you go sit in the library, get a stuffed animal, and just relax for 5 minutes. Just really show children that you are invested in them, and then they'll be invested in you, and then you'll have this level of respect for each other.
Definitely. I really like that you talk about investing in the children, and it just really it changes the way that even I think about how my interaction would be. Because if I'm investing in something, I'm really hoping to see it grow and nurture and see that whatever I do for it uh, leaves a very positive and powerful impact on it, not just teaching them. And it's like throwing something out there and like, well, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. But investing is something that's completely different with it.
Yeah.
So,
And that teacher, Lee, that you were talking about with the syrup and, drizzling it and making cool, she invested her time to do that. And that has made a lasting impression on you for all of these years. And so it
mhm.
could be the smallest little thing to a teacher because we're looking at the big picture, but to a child, it means the world if you just spend one one moment, to do something. So you never know the impact you have. You just got to keep going because you do make a lasting impression on children.
Yes, yes. And, as we start to wrap up here, I do want to touch on this idea of good and bad and desirable and undesirable. I believe that good and bad invite shame, and shame is kind of is difficult. It doesn't really. I don't think it helps with being open. It doesn't help that because all of a sudden I did something bad. I am bad. They don't hear I did something bad. I am bad. And so we want to make a distinction. So why is it that you say undesirable and desirable?
Because it's what you are expecting from that child. You are expecting this behavior. And so if you're saying, "Oh, that's a bad way to do that," it has a negative connotation for a child because they might be told their entire life, "Oh, you're a bad kid." There's good in everyone, As you said, like you step out into the world when you're an adult and you're like, there cannot be good in every single person, but there is good in everyone. You just need to foster that. Again, creating those relationships because you are expecting to have this positive behaviors, and that is what you are desiring for that child. And so when they're doing the opposite, that's an undesirable behavior because they are able to change their ways and to change it to a positive means for them.
Yeah, and when I think about that too, think about desirable, undesirable. So it's about them getting what they want out of the situation. So if they want, to be acknowledged, then throwing a temper tantrum isn't going to get them the kind of attention that they were looking for. They want to be acknowledged, not so much. So, do you desire to be acknowledged? Then do the desirable behavior to make that happen.
Right. And if you see a temper tantrum and you give in to them, then that child is thinking, okay, well, I can get away with this if I just, throw a temper tantrum. I'm gonna get whatever I want. And then that carries into your adulthood. So it's important that you're not always gonna get what you want in this
Hmm.
life. And again, that's where that distinctive line of, I'm not, I'm not just a friend of yours, but I'm also going to be your superior kind of, and guiding your mentor and guiding you through this crazy thing that we have called life.
Yeah. Well, Mr. K. mm, Well, Mr. K, this was a fabulous episode. I really enjoyed our conversation. And although we talked about children, we really are talking about people. Everything that we said here can be applied to an adult. We can talk about desirable and undesirable behavior without calling them good or bad. We can develop relationships with them. With day one, we can understand how they feel. We can not accuse them of things. We can do all these things. We don't have to just do them for children. But I mean, wouldn't it be great if they learned it sooner rather than later, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, Mr. K, can you tell us where we can find you?
Yeah, the Mr. K Show, a podcast for kids, is available on all audio streaming services. You can go to mrkshow.com and you can find all the links there. Probably where Patterns of Possibility is, you can also find the Mr. K Show. So once this episode concludes, you can just go right over and search the Mr. K Show.
Absolutely. And so, I do have a question though. Do you recommend it? Can you recommend an episode? Like, which one is a good one to start with?
I say start from the episode one. It kind of guides you through who the different characters are, but you can jump into any episode. So if you're noticing that your child or your students are having a difficulty of teamwork, then play that episode for them. Or giving thanks, play that episode. A big one that I was our season finale, which is I Can Do Anything, and telling kids that they can literally do anything if they just don't give up. They have that perseverance. So whatever you're noticing with your children, maybe they're having low self-esteem, start with episode 1, which is You Matter. And every episode, Mr. K, I end the episode saying, always remember you matter, because everyone matters in this world, no matter who you are or where you come from.
That's right. Everyone matters. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I have listened to a few episodes. I enjoy them, and like I said, they they are pretty high quality too. It's not just like a song, but you actually have sound effects and story with them too, different voices.
Yeah, so we have 4 voice actors that do our voice acting. We have an audio editor. We have a Hollywood composer who helps with the songs and the scoring. And so it is what we're trying to do again is to create that high quality for children and that Broadway style for them right on their devices.
Yes, absolutely. It'd be memorable and it's something that will stay with them for all time. I mean, if you watch Barney, you know the cleanup song. Do you
That's
know it?
right. I still know it. I still know it.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Mr. K. I loved having you here, and I hope that we could talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Lee. I greatly appreciate it.
My name is Coach Lee Hopkins, and you have been listening to the Patterns of Possibility podcast. You can find me at patternsofpossibility.com and on all social media at Patterns of Possibility. And as always, I want to encourage you to be yourself, live your truth, and there you'll make lasting friendships.